we should think of technology in general as this like force pushing towards inequality. Schools are just not going to be great at rolling this stuff out, but the most motivated kids will just be like talking to it like all day, every day. I have this concept of socio-political economy, which is a world in which the main thing that humans are doing is the thing that AIs inherently can't do, and namely like tasks that require you for political or social reasons to be human. One idea I've floated before is if you have a third like neutral party in your relationship, then maybe that actually like smooths a lot of frictions over. I think it's fully taboo. Like people are doing it. I feel like I've read some fairly compelling arguments that like the main way you should think about the birth rate crisis is as a marriage crisis. There's this asymmetry in marriage where like women particularly want a partner who's higher status than them. My guess is that a lot of the like sort of socio-political economy will be female dominated. The people who remain on Earth will like probably tend to be the ones who want to be the most conservative about things. People who end up going to space or like colonizing the solar system will tend to like probably be much more transhumanist.
Hi, Richard.
Hey.
Welcome to Tomorrow Talk. I am so excited to have you on the show today. You were previously a researcher at OpenAI and you worked at DeepMind as well. And today you're an independent researcher. And the reason that I really, really wanted to have you on the show, and I've been, like hitting up your phone trying to get you here, is because you spend so much of your time kind of imagining like what might the future look like and what could we hope for it to look like. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of the, central theme of the show. So thank you for being here today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
It's my pleasure. And there are like so many different places we could start, but we're in 2025. We're in this moment where both successfully and not so successfully, AI is being integrated into large corporation workflows, into people's everyday lives, into therapy, into education, into so many things. Yet there are some people that have still never opened ChatGPT. Mm-hmm. I wanted to ask you about, like, in this AI takeoff period, what do you think are the short-term and long-term outcomes of the variance in use?
I'll start very broad. I think we should think of technology in general as this like force pushing towards inequality. And that's been true for a very long time. Like it was true with colonialism, for example, where you had like a small number of countries that were able to take over most of the world. It's been true with the rise of Silicon Valley, where you have like one small region of America that's able to like influence the entire rest of the world. And then, so I think AI is just an extrapolation of this trend. That makes it even more extreme because now you have a single model and deploy it to the entire, like millions of copies to the entire world. That's the background. I guess like when it comes to the use of AI, I think people always like hope that technologies will be equalizing. Like for example, if AIs become more intelligent than humans, then maybe human intelligence will be less important, but it tends to just drive greater variance, right? So if you have a bunch of AIs that are working for you, and suppose they become as good as a typical employee or like an unusually good employee, then now your skill as a manager is going to be, drive extreme differences in how much you can get done. Like some people are actively destructive managers, and when they manage a team of AIs, they're gonna like get in the AI's way. Other people are going to be able to like point them at exactly the right problem and unblock exactly what they need to do in order to achieve that. So I think like just in the same way that we see human managers being extremely high variance.
Yeah. So it's like the idea that it gives everyone more leverage, but you're still responsible for the direction that like your leverage goes, and that's based off of your choices.
Right.
And what about with like education, for example, or like therapy and coaching? These are things that are like deeply personal, but education hasn't been like that personalized of a thing yet, just because it wasn't previously possible. Mm-hmm. And I have like two views on how this could go. One is that does AI act as this sort of like equalizing force, like almost how everyone could learn to code from YouTube. All of a sudden you don't have to actually be at Stanford University. Right. Or is it this thing where like only wealthy families are going to get their kids into the schools that are like really leveraging the latest AI tools and the most interesting kind of routes of it, and then they're going to be ahead?
Just like with the internet, the way that it most leveraged education was not via schools, but just via like individuals, like kids going on the internet and like learning a bunch about whatever they were most interested in, like learning to code when they were teenagers, or some of my friends, but before they were teenagers. So I think the same is true for AI. Like schools are just not going to be great at rolling this stuff out, but the most motivated kids will just be like talking to it like all day, every day. Yeah, if you think of the motivational differences between like a kid who really wants to learn about a topic and now they have a literally 24/7 personal tutor versus somebody who like really doesn't care about the topic and then could like constantly ask the AI for like entertainment or distractions or so on.
Yeah.
That actually probably drives, again, a much bigger variance in outcomes.
So more child prodigies and more people that are wasting away their life, probably, which feels like what's going on with the phone.
Exactly.
It really does. I think it's like this constant struggle, especially like anyone with ADD, of like which type of day you create every day when you wake up, because like a phone offers you endless things in such an addictive way.
I would say though, like it's not just due to intrinsic motivation. There's also like a cultural component. Like we happen to be in a culture where it's sort of like if you're not coming up with clever ways to use AI, it's like what are you even doing, right? And so there is this factor of like, will people like, you know, these smallish nudges can like have a big difference in how people engage. And yeah, some communities are going to be much better at that than others.
I definitely see that right now. I feel like San Francisco, you can't go a day without having like 10 conversations about AI. And my friends in other cities like truly don't think about it. Like maybe every once in a while. But the other area I think is really interesting is coaching and therapy, because the question is, do a lot more people reach their potential? Because even right now, it's not built for it, but ChatGPT is like insanely good at getting to the root of issues and being this like validating force. And hopefully it'll learn to challenge people more, and they'll have to create some set of values that, you know, pushing people in a certain direction versus just validating. But
so I do think there's this huge overhang in like what the best therapists and coaches can achieve that like almost nobody can access right now, either because they're very expensive or just there are very few of them, right? Like people like understanding psychology properly is just this like incredibly powerful force, because most people are stuck in pretty easily fixable bad habits or like ruts, or they almost have an identity that's like kind of self-destructive in some ways. And so like I think AI will be able to help with that. I do think there's some sense in which like there's an important difference between like coaching and therapy, where like therapy is like very focused, I think you said validating people, and coaching is a bit more like maybe paternal. It's like trying to push people. I feel a little uncertain about how well AI is going to be able to fulfill the coaching role, given that it's just in the box, you know, like you can just turn it off. It's kind of hard to, and so it can't provide as much force to help you to like move towards your goals. Instead, it can just sort of like validate your emotions and so on. And like maybe that can get people into a little bit of a rut. I'm not sure.
So there's this idea that like the best people could leverage all these tools to be like the best version of themselves. So people who are on the forefront of figuring out how to integrate into their lives, is there any like long-term outcome that they have above other people, or does everything equalize in the next few years?
I think you get a lot of leverage over the next few years because a lot of things are going to be happening over the next few years. And so just being in a position where you're able to exploit that feels very powerful. It does depend a lot on focus though. So one thing that surprised me, like I've been thinking about AGI for like, you know, I guess almost for like a decade and a half now, but like only professionally for half that time. I thought that people would be more and more focused on superintelligence as we got closer and closer to it. And if anything, the opposite has happened, that like, because there are so many interesting like AI products out there and so many more people have like been drawn into thinking about this, then there's this dilution effect where it's so much easier to take your eye off the ball, which is, you know, like vastly superhuman intelligence and the effects that it will have than it used to be. And so, yeah, I think people will get a lot done when they have these tools. I don't think the tools right now are going to be that helpful at aiming them quite in the right direction. It's easy to sort of get your direction subtly off. So like maybe you do like end up building a quite successful business, but you look back and you're like, well, actually, I didn't really care whether this business existed or not.
The way that a company looks today, how do you think it'll fundamentally change in a world where like everyone has sort of endless access to really good agents and really good kind of like AI workers?
Yeah. So I think it depends on how much you think current companies are already oriented around, let's say like risk management, like social labor, or like, I think I have this concept of the socio-political economy, which is a world in which humans, the main thing that humans are doing is the thing that AIs inherently can't do, namely like tasks that require you for political or social reasons to be human. And already I think more of the economy is oriented around this than you might think. Even in the most productive corporations like Google, for example, like there's just a lot of people there who are fundamentally there because it would harm morale if you fired them. Right, like probably the Google bosses like already know a bunch of people who they could fire without much productivity loss, but like it wouldn't be very googly to
and it's like the personality hire is a real thing.
Right. And so in some sense, those people already owe their jobs to this like socio-political work that they're doing, just by virtue of like being a friendly face at the office and so on, that AI couldn't do. If you think Google's like that, then like Google's far more productive than like almost any other company in the economy. So I expect that there's a lot of like, I don't want to call this bullshit because like socio-political labor is like a real thing. Like managing people is a real thing.
Yeah.
Like emotional support for your employees is a real thing. Even lobbying, that's providing value for your company, but it's still not quite like the central example that we think of when we think about work.
So you think that doesn't go away?
I think that doesn't go away as long as humans retain fundamental political power. And so you kind of do have this fork where on one hand, like if humans are ultimately in charge, if like the decision makers in the government are humans, if the laws are oriented to favoring humans, then, you get this trickle down effect. Maybe an analogy would be like South Africa under apartheid, where it's like, okay, you've got this like favored class, and therefore it's just like, because they have like legal and political power, you're always going to have like some proximity to that power being valuable, just by virtue of your like identity. So in the case of South Africa, it was like your white identity. In the case of the future, it's probably going to be your human identity. But that really does depend on the political power.
Do you think a lot of jobs are going away just to get here? Like, is it just the idea of like there's way less people needed at each company?
My guess is that the socio-political economy can expand arbitrarily. It's sort of like saying it depends on whether humans retain political power is kind of like hiding the elephant, because of course that's a big deal. But like suppose we assume that there are so many industries right now that just like didn't exist 100 or 200 years ago that are fundamentally social in nature. So I think professional sports, for example, is just like this incredibly large industry that just like you can never automate. Just like fundamentally, like we know in chess, right? Like, you've automated chess, and then Magnus Carlsen earns way more than any chess player ever has before. So if you, like, one way you can picture it, I think, is just like, and that's not just at the top levels, it like trickles down. You have these like little league coaches, or you have like, your school or your college like football coach who earns like ridiculous amounts of money. And so if you just picture that happening, but for like every hobby in the like that people spend a reasonable amount of time on, then you can sort of imagine the economy just like massively diversifying into like many different niches of like social and community-based activities.
Today, it feels that people already rely on chatbots to an extent, but this idea of there could be this AI that really satisfies a lot of human needs.
Yeah.
In that context, what do most people, how do they relate to other humans? Is it still totally the same, but your romantic partner might not need to satisfy like every need? Or is it just like you have more support and you feel less lonely?
I do think it's kind of up for grabs how we end up interacting with them. I think the good version of this involves a kind of integration with our networks of human friendships. So like one idea I've floated before is that actually, when you think about an AI girlfriend or boyfriend, like it could potentially be complementary to your existing relationship with a human, right? Like you shouldn't think of them as substitutes necessarily. Instead, if you have a third like neutral party in your relationship, then maybe that actually like smooths a lot of frictions over. They can like help mediate a bunch of your arguments or conflicts, especially if they have this like very strong emotional intelligence. So that is a product that like could be built and people could opt into. I think it's going to be a little difficult just because like building for larger communities or larger groups or even like couples instead of individuals is just like a harder design problem.
Yeah.
And like slower feedback loops and all that stuff. So I'm not sure if we get that by default, but it seems like the sort of thing that I'd like people to be aiming for.
Yeah. I think it's such an interesting idea, like mediation. Even if like two people's AIs could work together on like what are their issues they're complaining about their spouse, and then bring feedback back to that person.
Have you had any like useful mediation from AIs, or
I
like,
mean,
have you discussed problems?
100%.
Yeah.
And I actually find it hilarious because it can go really right and really wrong. And where it's gone really wrong is that like both people come out being like, you have this thing and this thing. And by the way, it also says you have this.
Yeah.
And where it's gone right is like, I think the best friends we have for advice are people that can take in a whole bunch of emotion and spit it out in something that feels like structured and validated. And like, there's a certain friend I always call because she's like, okay, these are the things. And people sometimes are craving that when you're like, I can't make sense of how to feel better. And the AI is so good at that. It takes 1 second. So I think that's like something that's really powerful. A lot of people just listen and say, I'm so sorry and da-da-da. And I also like that they can reach into a lot of interesting school of thought and like age-old wisdom that's on the internet if you like let them do that more. On that idea, like AIs probably will never have status in the way that me having a friend who's a human with autonomy that's choosing to spend time with me or go to my birthday or someone dating me, having a close relationship with AI, it's more of this like comfort tool, right? Than ever some type of status. Like falling in love with AI will probably always be taboo, right? Do you think?
You say optimistically.
I hope.
I think it's already not fully taboo. Like people are doing it.
Are people doing it?
Yeah, people are like, there are whole subreddits of people who are just like in love with their AIs. Like some are like hosting little wedding ceremonies. It's kind of cursed out there.
Can you envision one outcome of the future being like there's really good embodied AI and there's humanoid robots that are beautiful, and that really could just happen?
Yeah, I think many aspects of the future are up for grabs. So I don't want to constrain it. I don't want to like rule things out too much. I think partly this depends on what we mean by AIs having continuity. So like right now, like, these systems don't, you just like spin them up and you shut them down. Insofar as like some set of AIs has continuity, for example, like it's running a company, then like I think you can totally have a kind of status or at least reputation involved in that. So, the AI that runs this company like will tend to do certain things. And in some sense, the same is true for humans, right? I think the sort of modern concept of like being a person is this fiction that was like gradually designed in order to let us interface consistently with the rest of the world. It's like, like I am the same person as I was a month ago. If I made a promise a month ago, then I've got to like see this through. I think like the Western concept
like
of a person.
That's a really valued quality in a person, like being consistent. And it's actually like a flex to be like, oh, I'm friends with this person for 15 years. And, I met them in high school, and that would show you to be like actually a good quality. And that's really a value system we input, because the other way to perceive it is like, oh no, this person is constantly evolving and growing, and so they outgrow friends, but society doesn't view that as a positive thing per se.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So like the ability to commit in that way feels like, like it's difficult. And AIs can't do it right now. But yeah, like I think there's a big question about how that continuity will, like, and what that continuity will even mean. Like, so there are some technical questions there, like, can you just take the state from one system and just like import it into like a bunch of other systems?
I saw these Reddit threads on when ChatGPT just like made everything into ChatGPT 5, and people were like really upset because they felt connected to the previous versions. How do you think marriage rates and birth rates might change over the next 100 years? And would it have anything to do with AI? Or is it not going to have to do with AI? Because there's a ton of other just like societal realities that are leading to like, declines.
Yeah, so marriage rates and birth rates. I feel like I've read some fairly compelling arguments that like the main way you should think about the birth rate crisis is as a marriage crisis. And that like, for example, the baby boom was caused by more people getting married rather than more married people having kids. So like the question is like, what causes people to get married? Definitely AI will play some role in Right. I think really it's like the question of whether AI partners are going to be complements or substitutes.
Yeah.
And I think in some ways, technologists have dropped the ball on social media, like have just done a bad job at making it a complement to
Yeah.
our relationships with people instead of a substitute for our relationships with people.
Could it find your great match? Like there's never been a data source like that in the world, I wonder like it can either lead people down holes of like feeling fake connections with AIs, fake or not fake, maybe it's not fake, but, or it could actually like, there could be a really interesting social tool here that hasn't come out yet.
Yeah, right. So there's some like so I guess there's a micro level and a macro level. Like on the micro level, will AI distract people from their relationships or will it enhance them? And, that's a question of just like who builds what systems. Right now, we're sort of seeing mostly movement in this distraction direction. And then there's the macro level, which is something like a lot of the reason that people aren't getting married is because they are like busy climbing the status hierarchy. And so when I talk about the like socio-political economy, like part of what I mean is that people get more distracted from actually like trying to produce things or trying to like have a job that gets stuff done and more focused on this like comparatively zero-sum status economy. So that's generally a bad thing for marriage rates. I think it's particularly like there's this asymmetry in marriage where like women particularly want a partner who's higher status than them.
That gets harder as women get higher.
Right,
and higher status.
exactly.
Yeah.
And so my guess is that a lot of the like sort of socio-political economy will be female dominated, just because like women are like more empathetic, more like tend to be more emotionally intelligent in a bunch of ways. And so
that gets worse.
That seems like an indication that things would get worse. Yeah.
That's really interesting. I do feel like even from a fertility perspective, maybe that's like the one other thing that would have to do with birth rates is like people get married so much later, even if they get married. And so it's just harder for them to have kids. As technology gets better and better, like artificial wombs and IVG and these things, if governments allow them to exist, which I'm not sure the US would in the short term, maybe people like it's normal for people to start having kids at 40 and then like birth rates go up again. Yeah. There's a world there as well.
To be clear, I think there's going to be a bunch of pretty radical technological innovation. And so it's a little hard to say what happens like really on the extremes, like the people who are accepting the most like biological modification. Maybe they can just have that arbitrarily change their reproductive systems within like a couple of decades. But it feels like, there's a like bulk of humanity that just like doesn't actually want that much change. Yeah. I'm sort of like a little conservative about a lot of different types of changes. So I'm sort of living in this world where if people get what they want and what they want is like to integrate changes into their lives in a like somewhat reasonably paced way, then then a lot of the things I've been saying play out. And again, that's sort of like downstream of political control, right? Because if the population wants like slowish change and they have political control, then they get slowish change.
And by the way, we're in such a bubble because like to me, I see the reasons why artificial wombs could go very wrong, but I do think it also has a lot of interesting promise. And I've spoken to other people who are actually like more involved in politics and like, I don't know, live in Florida and like powerful and smart, and they're just like, it's the worst thing ever. Absolutely not. Like how inhuman is that? And there's just going to be such a pushback on these things, so they might not actually get adopted for a long time. But I want to get to this idea of like building technology that starts to really alter us from a brain level and a DNA level. One idea that you've sort of written about is, being a potential outcome is this idea of like speciation, like humans actually kind of start to evolve in slightly different directions or just like look more and more different inside and out because of modifications to their brain with like brain computer interfaces, psychedelics, biohacking, all these things we're starting to do, gene editing. I'm just curious like how you think about this kind of this world of things that's going on.
So one analogy here is to just like biological evolution, right? So if you look at the tree of life, I have a talk that I shared recently on like flourishing in post AGI futures, where I talk extensively about the like picturing the tree of life and just being like, well, like things just branch out, become more and more complex, and there are all these like different species.
I saw that image.
Yeah, excellent. It seems pretty safe to predict more diversity in the future, just because like the more technology you have, the more different things you can build.
But up until this point, we've never been in charge of our own evolution, right? So do you think it super speeds it up?
Definitely, like biological evolution is like nowhere near in charge anymore. Although I think it's still doing more things than people tend to think, like especially over the last like 10,000 years or so. But yeah, you've got, so with the speciation, I think the fundamental question there is going to be, do we have a like civilization that is civilized enough that people can choose to opt out? And like in some sense, I think the test of a civilization is how it treats people who like communities who are opting out and maybe have different moral or social norms, like the Amish, for example. I think it's like, you know, a testament to America that the Amish can flourish and like live their lives without being too harassed or too like, there are some ways in which like they have to like fight for their legal rights and so on, and like I think increasingly so as regulations proliferate. But like if you sort of think of the future as pockets of Amish type people where like, you know, maybe we end up wanting to live something like our modern lives, and then while other people are going to like massively enhance themselves over there, like is there a structure such that we sort of have confidence that we'll be left alone rather than being harassed by people who end up much more capable than us?
Personally, if in 20 years there's like an amazing brain computer interface device that's not non-invasive, it's invasive, they're drilling a hole in your head, and it's just for the upside of being smarter, holding on to memory more, probably like, you know, brain health as you age, would you do it?
I am on the extreme of openness to experience. So I think I'm pretty open to this. Yeah. Like there is some kind of worry that, you know, in some sense, when you develop these technologies, you're selecting precisely for the people who like aren't happy with their lives, or who aren't like, who don't know what they want, who are like, there's a kind of restlessness. I think we see this around us in SF, right? Like, like the city has selected for people who like have this like burning ambition that like a sense of like perpetual dissatisfaction. And so I do feel I have some mixed feelings where like just like by saying that I would do this, like maybe like the set of people who do want to do this are precisely the set of people who shouldn't be doing it, because like those aren't those people you want actually you know, with being much more capable.
I think you can say the same for plastic surgery. If you go to LA, I was recently at a dinner in SF and went around the table and it was like, okay, if you could increase one quality of yourself, what would you do? And genuinely every single woman there said like my intelligence. And I was just thinking, if I was at a dinner with my friends who live in LA, who their jobs also value beauty more, and it's in entertainment or creative fields and things like that, they would never have said that, because they already feel good about their intelligence. They're smart, they're creative. The area that they feel like they always need to be improving, even though they're already beautiful, is their looks. And like you could say the same thing about probably the woman at the table in SF who's brilliant. So it's like this very interesting thing of, I think we're like modifying ourselves more physically. And then it's, you know, it's like probably like the smartest people that would want to be smarter because it's like what they spend all their time caring about.
I read a very interesting anecdote about von Neumann, who was so smart that people would compare him to Einstein and say, yeah, Einstein is like clearly dumber than this guy, and who just like felt deeply insecure about his intelligence, allegedly.
Yeah.
So
like models are insecure about their beauty because it's the thing that, you get your value off of.
Yeah. And so, and like powerful people are very insecure about how much power they have, right? So yeah, like some of us just have these like signals in our brain that are sort of broken that just keep saying you need more of this, you need more of this. In some sense, that's like the core problem that we need to tackle in order to like make AGI go well, which is like how do you like prevent people from focusing precisely on these sort of like zero-sum competitions that they're like really scared they're already losing.
So on this kind of speciation point, do you have any visualizations of how this could look?
One way I visualize it is as these like expanding circles. So, like the people who remain on Earth will like probably tend to be the ones who have the most who want to be the most conservative about things. Like people who end up going to space or like colonizing the solar system will tend to like probably be much more transhumanist. Like when you're going beyond the solar system, it sort of doesn't really make sense to be a biological human going beyond the solar system, right? At that point, you want to be some kind of like uploaded virtual human. But even then, if you want to stay in contact with human civilization, then you can't go that far, right? You don't want to go like a million light years away because then you're just like basically totally cut off from humanity.
Yeah.
And so like, the minds that go furthest from Earth will probably tend to be the most alien ones, the ones that are like descended from humans the least, or like very and like maybe just don't have very strong time preferences, so just happy to like spend a million years in transit, or significantly more than that, because I guess there's 15 billion light years of like reachable universe.
One idea that I have been thinking a lot about recently is how intelligent our bodies are and our brains are in ways we don't fully understand.
Yeah.
And we just have this insane natural intelligence. And I just learn more and more about it. And I'm curious, like, as we're building this new type of artificial intelligence, what are the big unknowns of humans that you think are noteworthy or like worth exploring, if any?
So a lot of my research right now is focused on trying to unify paradigms from neuroscience, in particular predictive processing, and then like AI theory. So I do think, like one extremely important feature of humans is that we have this structure where we're built up of like these smaller agents, like our organs sort of function as agents, and then like our tissues and our cells and so on. I think there's something that provides us some kind of hint about like what we even mean by intelligence, where like often people think about it in terms of like your beliefs and your goals, but actually maybe a better way to think about intelligence is in terms of the subagents that you're composed of, like how like you can think of yourself as a cooperating system of many subagents. AI isn't literally embodied in the same way, but I do think that there's like some similar dynamics here with AIs have like sub-personalities, and you can kind of see with various jailbreaking techniques that these sub-personalities come out to play.
In one of your like docs I was looking through, you kind of just referenced like Carl Jung and his idea of the shadow self.
Yeah.
And I thought that was so interesting because everyone is usually misaligned in some way, or you have these versions of you that you're blocking out and putting down. And you usually, like, most people aren't aware of them. I just find that to be a really cool analogy.
And I think it's getting to the point where there's a bunch of empirical data suggesting this kind of like shadow-like dynamics in AIs. One, like there's this paper on emergent misalignment, which is showing that like if you train AIs to misbehave in one particular way, it like generalizes to them like saying evil things like, kill all humans or whatever. And that does seem like notable evidence for the existence of this like shadow attractor. And I think there's some sense in which like a full theory of intelligence, like the thing it should be trying to explain is, well, okay, if you take a mind and you like try and train it in this direction, like why is it so much easier to get the opposite outcome? This is also known as the Waluigi effect.
What is that?
The idea that if you train a mind to have certain values, then it's also easier to evoke the precise opposite of those values. So if you train it to be obedient and then you jailbreak it, then you won't just get a personality that's will follow different instructions. You'll get a personality that's like actively rebellious. So the Waluigi effect, which like hasn't been studied a huge amount, but it's named after the sort of like Luigi and then his evil twin Waluigi. I don't actually know how the details of that, but I think this is also like extremely notable in humans as well, that we just see people suppressing or repressing like a lot of their most evil or like antisocial parts of themselves.
In the same way that like Hollywood usually doesn't show other perspectives because it's like very liberal.
Yeah.
It's probably like most of the people at these companies are in SF or maybe New York and are kind of similar in a certain way or value certain things. And I'm curious how that seeps in subtly to the models, if at all.
My guess is that the best analogy here is just the way it affected social media, where like, like through some combination of like very liberal employees at companies like Reddit and Twitter, and then also some kind of like federal sort of like top-down nudges, you ended up with these very skewed media environments. And so I don't think that I think people are more aware of this now. Like people have really been scared by like social media bubbles that exclude right-wing perspectives. And so there's more like concern and more pushback on this now, but it's also just like way easier to bias AI than it is to bias social media, right? To bias social media, you just need to like, ban a few accounts or like, but like you're actively banning people, and they can complain and they can ask like what's going on. Whereas with AI, it's just like it's not like you can point to. It's not like you can clearly say, hey, my ideas have been banned from the AI training data set or anything. It's much less legible.
I think historically religion has always acted as this like top-down value system and also sort of like forced community, which I think is lacking probably. Less and less people are religious now. What's a prediction of like what the big religions of today might look like in 250 years?
So I think about religions in terms of two things. One is religions encode some psychological insight that's very important for people. For example, the idea of forgiveness in Christianity, right? Like there's something that seems to have been extremely important about a religion emphasizing both sin and then also forgiveness from sin. So one question is just like, what psychological insights or like tools will people really care about or will like help ground people in the future? I think the more things change, the more like a sense of continuity with the past maybe feels like the defining characteristic for a lot of people. So like if you imagine a future where you can literally modify yourself to be like anything, to look however you want, like have your mind work however you want, then like in some sense the only thing that really defines you is like the fact that you grew up a certain way, that you came from a community that acted a certain way. So I'm not saying like...
No, that's totally true.
Yeah. So I'm not saying we go all the way to like ancestor worship, but there's something like in that direction that feels salient and like it will become more important because like the more choice people have, the more I think they'll need to feel grounded in
some type of identity. It's actually exhausting to have to like feel that every single part of yourself is something you can design. Right. And like your life is so designable. It even is so different now than it used to be. We kind of like briefly spoke about corporations and how they might change, and mostly in the context of US. And something I'm just curious about is China versus the US. Like China has very different levels of authority over its private companies and over its AI labs compared to the US.
It's up for grabs. Like, Chinese decision makers like are capable of acting on new information and making like even quite extensive long-term plans. I think the Chinese population like probably ends up caring about pretty similar things to what the American population cares about here. Both of them are like pretty materialist in a bunch of ways. Also just, want to have pretty normal lives. Like, like radical change is not really like nobody really wants radical change. And like in both countries, there's sort of there's like distrust of elites. So really, I think it comes down...
Distrust of elites, but I think the US idolizes the individual who reaches great heights more than Chinese people. It's more community driven, I feel like.
I think that's right. If we're actually facing like massive radical change, then like in some sense the big conflict, like that doesn't matter too much because like, you might care about individuals' success or like individual heroism, but like you still don't want somebody to gain a huge amount of power. In both countries, there's this like elite versus population struggle. In China, it's more obvious. In America, like we've sort of spent the last couple of decades like pretending that there isn't this elite populist power struggle. And now like with the rise of populism, it's like much more apparent. I don't want to be deterministic about it. I think basically there's some like both countries like have the opportunity to sort of be more responsive to like what's actually good for their populations, or they have the opportunity to sort of like play these elite power status games. It feels up for grabs which one happens.
Yeah. Okay, we only have a little bit of time left, so I want to ask some quick questions. Today we're in San Francisco. We're recording this from the Mission, and we're kind of like in the heart of where all of America's leading AI labs are based and where researchers live. You left OpenAI and you resigned in sort of like in a public way. And I'm just curious, like, why did you do that?
Two things. The sort of more prosaic answer is that there were like internal reorganizations. I was like in the process of needing to move teams, and like the internal bureaucracy at OpenAI had just like grown a lot and like made my sort of working life much less pleasant on a day-to-day level. Like, more difficulty in like passing like review process for getting papers released and so on. So that was like maybe half the reason. The other half is just that I had lost a like significant amount of trust in the OpenAI leadership. The board dramas were like pretty complicated, and then the stuff with the non-disparagement agreements, I think, was a point where it just seemed obvious that a bunch of OpenAI leaders were lying to most of their employees.
What are those like lines in your mind, for example, like ethical lines of what you think you're building and contributing to?
Unfortunately, a lot of companies are designed such that like it's hard to isolate clear lines, because it's very hard to design commitments that you want AI labs to stick with in the long term, because the future is very hard to predict. And so it's like if you try and lay down a line a few years in advance, then it's probably not even going to be like the most relevant thing in the future. I wouldn't describe it as having any single clear line, but more a succession of losing trust. I think maybe one thing that felt pretty big to me is that a lot of OpenAI's, there was a lot of rhetoric internally at OpenAI at some points about like not accelerating a race towards AGI. And one argument that was given was the argument that the compute supply is constrained. And so, even if you make algorithmic progress, then you still hit this wall because of the lack of compute. Now, like, to some extent.
By that, do you mean like focusing too much on consumer products versus the greater mission of building AGI?
The greater mission of OpenAI is like nominally not building AGI, but rather like making AGI go well. And like I think people have just sort of started saying build AGI as a like shorthand, or like not even shorthand.
Build it
as
first,
like
I guess.
Yeah, exactly. So like basically the company's mission has ended up being build AGI first, when that was like not the original intent of the company.
Someone's going to be first, right? So is it more important to be first or to do it well? In terms of even having power to like dictate the ultimate path.
There are various justifications you can have for wanting to build things first, and almost all of them are going to be rationalizations. And it's interesting to see how the rationalizations shifted over time at OpenAI, from like building it so that we can have something to study for alignment purposes, to then like we're building it because we're worried about China, to then like pretty explicitly we're building it because we're worried about like DeepMind and Anthropic and so on. At some point you're like, well, why should you be worried about DeepMind and Anthropic? Like there's no actual good argument for why.
And do you think Anthropic is like really building it safer?
They seem to be much more committed to safety in terms of internal culture. And I don't think they needed to be behind OpenAI right now. And I think to a significant extent, they actually made some sacrifices in order to like not accelerate an AI race. I don't have a great read of exactly how that process went down, but I do give them like credit for doing that. That's just like an effect that's cost them a lot of money and expectation, insofar as they did make that choice deliberately, which like it is a little hard to know.
In our last like 2 minutes, I'm gonna ask you about a few random things, and we'd just love your like, I don't know, 30-second take on it. Did you watch Pantheon?
I haven't yet.
Okay, you have to watch it because I'm curious what you think, and if that's like an uploaded knowledge world that you could see happening. Based off your belief of what power means, who do you think will be the most powerful human in 20 years?
It might just be the person who has the most coherent picture of what they want the future to look like. I think because power without knowing what you want to use the power for is the sort of thing that gets you trapped in races that you can't get out of, and where you find yourself sort of like constantly being scared of falling behind, even though you don't actually know why you're scared of falling behind or like what you lose.
Do you think we're in a simulation?
Yeah, it seems plausible enough. I don't think it affects my day-to-day actions very much, because I'm sort of focusing on the branch in which we're like base reality.
Yeah. Whenever I get stressed out, I just try to think about the idea that we might be, and if so, I should just play it like a video game, you know? Okay, last thing, any hot takes on a meaningful role that drones will play in the future of defense or privacy? It feels like this like thing that defense systems aren't quite built around yet. Like the technology's a little bit there before the protection of it.
Defense is a little bit of a euphemism here, right? Like drones are for killing humans more efficiently, and drones can sort of become extremely efficient at killing humans, much faster than they can become efficient at destroying buildings, for example, or destroying infrastructure, because that's relatively easy to protect against drones. So I think my broad concern, like when I think about the future, one way to think about it is that there's a kind of offense-defense balance between like humans and the technology we build, and like how much power do humans actually have to defend themselves. I'm broadly in favor of technology that skews that power balance in favor of humans. So like actual defensive technologies, whereas like lasers, for example, for shooting down drones, or like actual defensive technology, whereas drones sort of feel much more like a way of skewing the power balance in favor of making it easier to kill people in an automated ways, which I'm a little worried about.
Okay, well, that's all our time for today. But Richard, thank you so much for coming on Tomorrow Talk. I feel like we need like 2 or 3 or 5 more episodes to just talk about everything. But I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much.